Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. And here's your meme of the day, brought to you by FiveMind.com. Well, would you look at that? Once again, it's less all roads lead to Rome, and more like all taxpayer fraud leads straight to the DNC's frickin' headquarters. This has to be the least surprising update of this whole Minnesota Somali fraud case. I wonder why Tim Walz and others were so hellbent at blocking investigations of what was going on here. Yeah, probably because the entire thing seems to be a Democrat money laundering scheme, or at least in some ways it seems like money is coming back in terms of campaign contributions. It's funny because Democrats are always acting so holier than thou, yet they seem to be implicated in everything. So yeah, this massive fraud case in Minnesota is now being connected to Keith Ellison. That's of course the Democrat AG in the state. Let me show you guys what's going on or what's being said here. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright friends, so here's the backstory. We've got this quote Feeding on Future Foundation scandal, supposedly a child nutrition program to feed the kids during COVID, but now as we're looking back it turned out to be one of the biggest welfare frauds in US history.
Somalian pirates robbed us for $1 billion.
According to a new bombshell report from the New York Times, Somalian migrants in Minnesota have defrauded nearly $1 billion in taxpayer-funded benefits under Democrat Governor Walz's leadership.
This was the biggest COVID scam in American history.
A nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claim to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children. In fact, those organizations' leaders spent the money on houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya.
Somalis were stealing your money right under Tim Walz's nose. And this didn't come out of the blue. There were red flags and whistleblowers. But the Somalis played the race card. They said they'd sue and go to the press if the funds didn't come through. This was right after the Floyd riots. Walz didn't want the racial heat. Minnesota Democrats also didn't want to tick off one of their most powerful voting blocs. We've been importing thousands of Somalians into Minnesota for decades, and they've been feasting on Minnesota's welfare programs. Now they're political heavyweights. So when government whistleblowers told Walz what was happening, he tried shutting them up, they say. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. So Walz had a COVID snitch line, but when someone snitched on the Somalis, he hung up the phone.
$250 million stolen. That's in this one program alone, and keep in mind, this fraud was pretty much systemic across multiple different programs, and now the report is that apparently those implicated in these fraud schemes were actually politically connected and possibly funding the campaigns of these high-profile Democrats, in this case, Keith Ellison.
Recently released audio recordings reveal conversations that happened between the Attorney General and individuals who were later implicated and in some cases convicted in the Feeding Our Future scandal. In those recordings, the Attorney General was asked in those recordings to use his authority to protect businesses under investigation for wrongdoing, and rather than distance himself or remain neutral to allow the legal process to unfold, he responded in those recordings, "Of course, I'm here to help." The Attorney General in those recordings even urged the individuals, "Let's go fight these people." He was offered campaign contributions during that meeting, contributions that he later accepted. The release of those audio recordings raises questions about what's going on in the Attorney General's office that go directly to the need to pass the legislation that we had previously debated, House File 20. Although he has insisted that nothing came of the meeting, his office blocks disclosure of closed investigative
point
data.
of order. Masons 124.
The A11 will help ensure that what happens behind closed doors in the Attorney General's office sees the light of day. We can protect people's privacy while shining a light on what the Attorney General's office is doing, who is influencing that office, whether it's those under a criminal investigation, nonprofits, corporations, or billionaires with political agendas, because Minnesotans have a right to know when their Attorney General's office is working with them. Minnesotans have a right to know whether the Attorney General is telling the truth that nothing came of that meeting. That's why the A11 is so important.
So there's now accusations floating around that these taxpayer fraudsters are somehow connected to these politicians and maybe even bankrolling the campaigns. And it really makes you wonder. Has me thinking about how all those Democrats took all that FTX fraud money from Sam Bankman-Fried, and so many of them refused to give back the donations. But I think beyond that, it's kind of painting a picture of systemic Democrat taxpayer fraud. After everything we learned this year, especially following the Doge audits, it feels like scams like these are basically the Democrat MO. This is what they do. They build these elaborate scam systems, create these massive, giant, compassionate programs, or in many cases, compassion industries, like with homelessness and immigration and everything else, or as they say it, the refugee crisis, the asylum crisis. During COVID, it was COVID relief, right, and child nutrition. Or looking at Minnesota, you've got autism services. Just build some sort of initiative, some sort of massive program, open the federal dollar floodgates. It's the useless pork and such in the bills that we're constantly referencing, funding X through Z every random initiative you could imagine, in many cases to the tune of millions upon millions of dollars. If you don't give the Democrats all their little wishful spending programs, they'll invent some sort of constitutional crisis to try to force your hand anyway. And look at what you're funding. You're funding fraud rackets, billions of dollars going into these fake philanthropical husks. There's nothing there. And I guess we know where the money's going. It's going to warlords in Africa. It's going to Al-Shabaab and terrorist organizations. And likely a good chunk of it is going right back into the Democrat machine. It's going to their campaigns. It's going to their Act Blue donations. It's coming in as donations under random social security numbers. You got Democrats out of frickin' nowhere pulling $2 billion out of their to run Kamala Harris. Where'd the money even come from? You've got Democrats running national level kabuki theater constantly, whether it's Antifa riots or hashtag No Kings or the January 6th theater. They got money coming out the wazoo. They spent over $300 million on the No Kings demonstrations, and it seems as though in some way it's all connected. These taxpayer schemes, these USAID NGO funding schemes, at this point, after decades upon decades, it's an entire expansive web of thousands of NGOs. Who knows where the money's going? Who knows how much is getting lost in the webs and simply making it right back to the Democrat election coffers? And it seems like in Minnesota, that might be exactly what happened. Somehow, these top Democrats are connected. Maybe that's why Ilhan Omar is throwing such a freaking hissy fit in her defense. Maybe that's why Tim Walz has gone silent, gone freaking MIA, and is totally refusing to cooperate after it's been alleged that he supposedly stifled an internal investigation on this issue. I wonder why that is. Why Keith Ellison was so buddy-buddy and so connected with two of the biggest fraudsters in American history when it comes to corruption, when it comes to waste, fraud, and abuse, when it comes to embezzlement, theft, and waste of the taxpayer dollar. I gotta tell ya, nobody does it like the Democrats. Anyways, that's what I got for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.